Home. What's happening?
Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night, and I hope that everyone is being safe, that your family and your friends are safe, and if not, I truly do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There has been a ton of stuff that has happened over the past 24 hours, especially inside the country of Ukraine. And there is a ton of stuff that has happened globally as well. And if you check out the video description below, you'll find that there are a ton of charities down there. Why? Because you guys as a community allow us to be the news that gives back. The 100% of everything we do here is for charity. When we're talking about the news, we want you to be informed about what's happening throughout the world and be able to have some kind of an impact on what's happening. We're never doing super chats on this channel, and we are never pushing any kind of merchandising. Everything we do is for charity, and down below we have listed a ton of different charity links for different situations ongoing throughout the entirety of the globe. So please be sure to check them all out. 80% or more of all the donations that these organizations receive go directly to the programs, meaning they go directly to helping people in need instead of going to things like salaries and administration's costs, the things that really weigh down a lot of charity organizations. But of course, there is a ton of stuff happening, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it here shortly. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, please remember to give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the greatest things you can do for the channel and the project is to share us on social media, let your friends know about us, like, subscribe, and all of that wonderful normal YouTube jazz. The reason being is the more people that come here and watch this, overall, the bigger of an impact we'll have. One of our goals right now is to just get to the point where we can put charities and fundraisers onto the streams. Why? Because the more people that are here, and if we have those fundraisers directly onto the streams, we can start raising money through the stream every single night. We're going to put a fundraiser on every single stream, and the goal is to also find a fundraiser that directly supports the main topic of the night, whether that be Ukraine, or whether that be Africa, or the Middle East, or what have you. So please be sure to, if you can't give a lot, give a little, and if you can't give anything at all, please help us at least grow this project. And there's been a lot of growth, wonderful things to hear today, a couple of big announcements on the channel side of things. So the first time, it was on August 10th, we actually celebrated that we got 200 views in a 24-hour time span. Less than a month later, thanks to you guys' support, we hit 1,100 views today on last night's video, which is it's really hard to fathom for me that many people would be watching us. But it's pretty awesome to see that kind of a community here, and it's wonderful to be able to see that many people kind of interested in what's going on throughout the world, and that many people that are interested in trying to help too. So please continue to give us that support. I can't thank you enough for the support that you guys have already given us. I also have noticed that there are a ton of new people that are here today. We've gotten, like, pretty sure over like 20 or 30 people that have subscribed to the channel. Welcome to the community. You can also check out the other community links that are also in the description, like our Discord and stuff too. And it's very active, a lot of talking on there, a lot of stuff being posted from throughout the world, but it's awesome to see you guys. Welcome to the community, welcome to the channel, and thank you very much for supporting us. I really can't thank you guys enough. But with that, we're going to go ahead and start rolling right into the news here. Before we do, please be sure to ask questions. I understand a lot of this stuff is rather complicated, so please be sure to ask these questions. I will answer them to the best of my ability. To give you a little bit of a backgrounder on myself, I was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I was an O-352 anti-tank missileman, which is an infantry marine that operates the Javelin anti-tank system and the TOW missile systems, whether that be the TOW-2 or the Sabre system. I also, of course, was fully cross-trained as a machine gunner operating in a mounted unit, the CAT platoons. I did 2 tours. My first tour was to Syria, where I spent roughly 4.5 months, 6 months in total for the deployment. My second tour, also 6 months total, I spent it in Iraq, in the Baghdad Embassy complex, where I oversaw anti-armor operations, and I also spent it in Kuwait with Crisis Response Unit, and also in Saudi Arabia, training Saudi Arabian Marines. So please be sure to check out the and ask questions. And if you guys are interested in what's going on with the map or want any more of the info on here, please also make sure to go to our website. We have them all listed and archived for you. With that, let's go ahead and jump right into everything that's going on, because there is a ton of it, especially in the country of Ukraine. And we actually get a little bit of an update of something that we haven't talked about for a little while now. And that is because this is up here, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, Zadyzhia, which is in the Kiev Oblast. I'm not going to be showing the actual link to this because it is a little bit more of on the graphic side, and I don't feel comfortable showing that here. But this was shared by Ilya Ponomarenko and several of the agencies that we check out, and that is that a body of an unknown Ukrainian male was found in a shallow grave here within the Kyiv region. His head was covered with a burlap sack, and much like other victims, his hands were bound behind his back. Later reports also indicate that his body had signs of trauma related to things such as torture, which is very consistent with victims that we've seen up here within the Kyiv Oblast in areas that were liberated earlier on. Once again, the dead tally is really going to, if we ever truly know, will take quite some time to find out. It's going to take quite a bit. There's still ongoing investigations here, which is actually going to lead us over here into our next point, which is the fact that the investigations are still underway here by international teams and by Ukraine themselves. And what we see is that as of, quote, as of September the 1st, 1,356 dead bodies of Ukrainian civilians killed by Russian occupiers have been found in the Kyiv region. 207 people are still reported missing. And that's coming from Andriy Nubitov, who is the Kiev regional police chief. And before we, as a little bit of an intermittent pause here between the two sections of real kind of depressing information, what we see is that there's no Patron stamps coming out. So Patron has his own stamps now, and he has Patron, by the way, stands for cartridge in Ukrainian, and it is this little, I believe it's a Boston Terrier. Forgive me, I'm not up to date with my dog breeds, but he's a little Boston Terrier. He literally has a vest. You can carry him around like a little suitcase. It's hilarious. This dog is adorable, and he's an EOD dog. He's a bomb-sniffing dog. So he goes out and he actually finds explosives. And we know in the Kyiv Oblast, he found roughly 350. He's found over 400 pieces of unexploded ordnance and landmines up in the Chernihiv Oblast as well. So he's got a lot of endeavors, but he's loved by a lot of children. On top of his work there on the ground, actually finding these unexploded ordnances, he's very well-natured, and he's very suitable and loved by children. So he goes around and gives seminars, and he goes to hospitals and stuff. One as a morale booster for a lot of children who are injured or have lost their families and homes and whatnot. But he also teaches children about the dangers of unexploded ordnances as well. Because children especially are at risk. You know, children relatively don't know right from wrong in a lot of aspects. They don't know truly how dangerous a lot of this stuff is. And so it's quite pretty terrible, but he is here, and he teaches, and he's there as a learning tool as well for these Ukrainian children, so that way they learn the dangers of these unexploded ordnances, which will persist in Ukraine for years, if not decades. Oh, sweet, Harry Gregg's here. Harry Gregg, for those that don't know, this is someone that we've actually vetted on the channel. We've actually worked with other communities to vet too. He is someone who is actually in Ukraine, which is pretty awesome to see. So hello, Harry. Welcome to the live stream. I hope that you enjoy and can at least kind of back some of the stuff that we're saying here. But if you check out in the video description below, one of the different fundraisers links is actually his. He's actually part of a medical team there in Ukraine, and they're trying to get another vehicle. Their last one was damaged, and I actually saw a lot of photos of it, and it was pretty messed up. But they are trying to get a new vehicle to exfiltrate wounded out of there, which is pretty awesome. And once again, we have actually vetted this individual. We actually have vetted them and gone through a pretty extensive process, as well as correlating it with other sources that we have and other communities that we are a part of to ensure that that is in fact legit. So please be sure to go and check him out too. Everything for him is in the description. Oh, cool. So Harry is saying he's not in Ukraine right now, so just as a heads up. But, well, I'm glad to see that you're at least safe there, Harry, at least relatively. But as we continue here, so these Patron stamp series will actually go towards getting an Amtrak 400 mine clearing vehicle. So this is going to assist those efforts. Clearing out mines and unexploded ordnances is a very slow and dangerous job. And of course, getting some specialized equipment that Ukraine currently doesn't possess is going to make that a lot easier, especially considering the volume of unexploded ordnances that they'll have to go through. There's at one point they found 738, and this is coming from the State Emergency Services of Ukraine, 738 unexploded pieces of ordnance within 0.28 square miles of within just 0.28 square miles of Ukrainian territory up here in the north. It's insane. But just take a look. And of course, you can't just not love this dog. There's President Zelensky. That is his handler right there, whose name escapes me. I apologize. They are officiating the stamps of Patron, which is what you're seeing on the wall behind him as well. So pretty awesome to see. Come on, it's just an awesome little pooch. This dog is amazing. So once again, all the proceeds are going to be going to actually making or actually buying a Amtrak 400 mine-clearing vehicle. But now we start getting back into the more heavy-hitting stuff regarding the war. So the first thing that we have here is actually, it's coming from the press service and the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. And it is that, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have destroyed or damaged 205 religious buildings in Ukraine. Once again, going after a group based off of religious grounds is actually considered ethnic cleansing and genocide, as well as crimes against humanity, depending on the factor. And all of these targets, religious buildings especially, are actually protected under the Geneva Convention as long as they are not being used for military purposes, which is why you see, in fact, during things like the Iraq invasion, where mosques were actually being targeted in places such as Fallujah and Basra and other locations throughout the Middle East, is because they were actually being used as kind of safe havens for Mujahideen fighters. And what we see here is that the Ukrainians, in general, we haven't seen any indicators that they are using these as military targets. A lot of these have been destroyed in saturation bombardments, by large bombardments using BM-21 Grad systems on a lot of these Ukrainian cities that have essentially wiped them off of the map for all intents and purposes. As we continue on here, we see that that war crimes have turned into crimes against humanity. A topic I touched on a little bit yesterday. For those that may not have been here for that, basically what I was saying is that we understand and we know for a fact, because it's a war, we have to admit the fact that both sides have committed war crimes against each other in some capacity. There's 100% with every guarantee in every bone in my body, I can guarantee you that the Ukrainians in some point have committed a war crime. Whether that's an execution of a prisoner, whether it's terrible conditions of prisoners before they were sent back to the higher echelons, what have you, it's guaranteed to have happened at least one time. And the difference is the scale. War crimes in general are bound to happen. Every war has had them on both sides. I mean, even the Allies during World War II is pretty bad. But if you go and you check out, this, I mean, this is from the Prosecutor General's office, and they said since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have committed 31,059 war crimes against Ukraine and its citizens, end quote. And that's coming from the Prosecutor General's office. 30,000 war crimes goes beyond there's some bad eggs. This goes beyond some bad stuff happened. This goes so far beyond that it is just unbelievable. And that's where we start seeing this whole crimes against humanity thing happening. So yes, are there war crimes being perpetrated by both Ukrainian and Russian forces? Yes. However, it's a scale. This stuff scales, and you can't say that 31,000 instances of war crimes does not constitute a crime against humanity. It is too wide scale. Now, someone here who had asked a question earlier, brought up in an earlier stream, said, well, is it that they're being ordered to do this? Most likely not. It's probably actually quite the opposite. In the United States military, whenever we had to go and do something, it said that Zach Jeffers is actually touching on this topic in the chat right now. He says, at Riley, it seems like committing war crime is a part of the Russian armed murders is a part of their doctrine. So first of all, please be sure to kind of keep those kind of comments to a minimum. I don't prefer derogatory terms inside of my chat, please. But anyway, as we continue, the thing is that I'm trying to say it's with the U.S. military, for instance, and every time I went out, it doesn't matter. When we responded to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, time was paramount. We had to get on the bird. We had to get on the birds, and we had to get there. There was no, we had to go right now. Right now, we have to go. And we still had to take the time to have rules of engagement. We had to find out what our ROEs were. We had to have a briefing about it. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to have rules of engagement. The Russians, we see this very early on throughout the war, throughout the beginning of the war. The Russian troops showed a lot of restraint in a lot of ways. In fact, you probably may remember very famously, a Ukrainian babushka went up to this Ukrainian soldier and was berating him on the side of the street in an area that had just been occupied at the very opening day of the war. And she said, and she dumped a bunch of sunflower seeds in front of him, and he said, "Remember to fill your pockets with sunflower seeds, so that way when you die, they can grow within the Ukrainian soil." So that's pretty good restraint on the part of the Russians very early on. That's gone. Those rules of engagement seem to have gone away completely. And that's where we see there isn't any briefings. There's no accountability within the Russian forces. There is no rules or orders to not do these things. And that's really what perpetuates war crimes, is the lack of accountability, the lack of guidelines, the lack of giving your left and right lateral limits. And that seems to be the case for the Russians. I don't think it's ordered in many ways, at least on the individual small infantry unit level. But also, when in some ways it can be ordered when you're talking about these mass bombardments of cities that are very obviously have to be targeted in some way, and an order must be given to fire. Those can be considered ordered. We also get a child casualty update from the Prosecutor General's office. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 380 Ukrainian children have died. 736 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. Once again, within the Donetsk region, most of the people within the Luhansk and the Donetsk regions thought they had seen it all. They had been in these regions while the war between the Ukrainian forces and the Russian-backed separatists had been fighting since 2014. And the government urged them, as the Donbass campaign was getting ready to begin, please leave. This is not what you thought it was going to be like. This is nothing what you think you've been through. And a lot of people, these are their childhood homes. This is where their families grew up. Their families have been here for generations. This is where everything they have is. Why should they leave? They've already been through war. Well, unfortunately, for a lot of people, it came too little, too late. And we see that as the most bitter fighting in this war has taken place within the Donbass, within the Luhansk and the Donetsk regions, and of course now the Kherson region as well. But it's just, when you're talking about child casualties, it's bad enough that an entire generation of young men and women are going and they're getting, dying in quite large numbers, fighting and dying and being severely wounded and maimed, quite a large numbers. World War I, it should have proven when entire generations of countries' populations were entirely wiped off the face of the earth. And we're seeing it once again here in Ukraine, on both the Russian and Ukrainian side, as both sides do take quite heavy casualties. And to see even younger generations suffering at such a large extent is quite heartbreaking, to say. I mean, there's nothing. It's children. Children are inherently innocent in a war. As we continue, the final point here in Kyiv is that it's a war on education. It's a war on many things, but it's a war on education too. The Russian Duma alone stated that, and I quote, in Ukraine they teach you World War II instead of the Great Patriotic War. That is the Russian Federation's education in a nutshell. The Great Patriotic War of the Soviet Union. World War II, as pretty much everyone here probably knows it, was quite a much larger endeavor than just the Soviet Union. Millions of people across the entirety of the planet fought in that war. In every corner of the world. The Russians see it as only the Soviets fighting the Germans. And we can see that they have no regard for places like educational establishments. Once again, civilian infrastructure that is protected by the Geneva Convention. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian occupiers have damaged 2,328 and destroyed 289 educational establishments in Ukraine. That's coming from Alexei Sergeyev, who is the head of the Organizational and Analytical Support and Operational Response Department of the National Police of Ukraine. And what makes this even more impactful is today is actually Knowledge Day in Ukraine, and today is the first day of the 2022-2023 Ukrainian school year. School is officially back in session, and we can see some of this here.
So today is the first day back at school for children in Ukraine. At least it would be, except for all those whose schools have been blown up. So let's just pretend for a moment. Let's imagine you are that 5-year-old. You know, it's the first day, it's all that anxiety, it's a bit of excitement, it's new friends, it's new school. Let's have a walk around of what today could have been like if it wasn't for war. Let me just flip this round. So here you are, you know, you'd come in here, you're holding your mum's hand, maybe the principal is there. These are your very first steps, but, well, now you're walking over glass. You know, you would have come through here. This could be the moment that you're actually farewelling your mum. You know, you're saying goodbye to her there, and then you're being led down here, seeing all these new faces, the kids who you'd become friends with over the years, and then that big moment of being led into your first classroom. This war really needs to stop.
This is a post by UNICEF Ukraine, which is the UN, basically International Child Fund. They said thousands of schools across Ukraine have been damaged or destroyed, with less than 60% of them deemed safe and eligible to reopen. Today starts an uncertain school year for 4 million school children and still inside of Ukraine. And as we continue, yet another post by UNICEF from today. Very powerful images. These are schools that have been damaged or destroyed across Ukraine with local school children in and around them to really show you, this war has impacted quite a significant amount of people. And children, especially, considering their school year ended and is now beginning once again in a war zone. This is coming from the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, which is the Ukrainian parliament. They say on September 1st, Ukraine celebrates the Day of Knowledge. Unfortunately, not all schools open their doors. Not all children and students return to their classroom. We remember, we will avenge everything. And they actually gave us a little thing here. 2,405 Ukrainian educational institutions were damaged as a result of Russia's armed aggression. 270 of them were destroyed completely. 379 children who were murdered by the occupiers will never take their first class. 735 more children were injured. And finally, this comes from the Defense Department of Ukraine. It said, first day of school, this is where the kids in Kyiv, in a Kyiv school, will have to study during air raids. This must not become the new normal. The Russian terrorist state must be stopped. All children are entitled to a peaceful childhood. Their future depends on us. And Ada Zagorodina is the one who took these photos. But this is inside of basically the basement of a school here in Ukraine. This is where they would study during air raids that were happening throughout the school day. So I'm going through and reading the chat here. Let's talk about World War II. A couple things that have been brought up throughout this. Russia tried their hardest to be allies with Hitler until Hitler backstabbed Stalin. That's true. The war began long before Pearl Harbor, for those that don't know. Pearl Harbor was just the United States' entry into the war after the Japanese bombed the naval fleet, the Pacific Fleet, in Pearl Harbor. But the war started in 1939. Germany invaded Poland from the east, or from the west, sorry. And then the Soviet Union declared war and invaded Poland from the east about 2 weeks later. There's actually a pact between the two countries until Hitler actually backstabbed Stalin and began with Operation Barbarossa, with the invasion of Russia and the Soviet Union. So it's the Russians played a huge part in defeating the Nazis. There's no doubt about that. Between estimates for Soviet casualties throughout the duration of the war are anywhere between 20 and 80 million people. There is no exact figures. The casualties are, the average casualty count is about 27 million people for the Soviets. They took an immense amount of losses. They took an immense amount of casualties, a lot of civilian deaths. But the situation is that, with their education, they talk about how it was pretty much just the Soviet Union. The Allies didn't help them. The Allies didn't do anything. The Allies delayed stuff to spill Russian blood. And that's not the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is that the Soviet Union wasn't prepared for the war. Soviet Union then had the same issues that they have now. They were using outdated equipment. They were using tactics that they didn't have. They didn't have the industrialization for war. They didn't have the supplies for a war. They didn't have the vehicles necessary for the war. They were using a doctrine that was far too old. They took immense amount of casualties. You don't see a T-26 anymore in Russia because they were destroyed. You don't see KV-1s anymore. They were destroyed. No, what do you see? You see the eye-watering numbers of T-34s, which were also destroyed, but they were produced using mostly American steel through the Lend-Lease Act and fueled with American oil through the Lend-Lease Act and the oil from the Caucasus, that it allowed for the Russians to basically tank the losses and just keep rolling. And that's pretty much what we see. And the Soviet Union says that the United States and the other allies, especially nowadays, traded Russian blood for their own interests to weaken the Soviet Union, when that's not really the case if you look at it at a historical level. But JL says, did you know that the Soviet Russia literally used the same tactic that these right now? And that's coming from JL, someone in the chat. Yes, actually. So the tactics that you are seeing developed right now is that what you're seeing right now inside of Ukraine is actually something that was developed and further built upon during World War II and immediately following in the Cold War. The doctrine Russia is using now is really a scorched earth doctrine. It's a Soviet doctrine. It's not the new Russian Federation doctrine. I know because I've read the one. It was published in 2014. You can find it on the Russian Embassy to the United Kingdom's website. So the doctrine is that about the main changes to their original doctrine from World War II to now is weapons upgrades. Obviously, technology has developed quite significantly. The second thing is a lack of light infantry. The Russians don't maintain any light infantry regiments. Everything is either motorized or mechanized. But you see heavy artillery usage. Phase 1, basically, of the Russian doctrine, bombard an area until nothing is living there anymore. The second phase of a Russian doctrine is then to take a massive amount of tanks and armored vehicles and drive a spearhead through that recently precursor bombarded area and try and break through and create a gap in the lines. You can see how well that's working out for them. The losses, basically it forces them into a doctrine of full frontal attack with unsupported armor, and that leads to extremely high casualty rates, especially when you don't have experienced troops. And it leads to a scorched earth policy that has no regard for the Geneva Convention whatsoever. Moving on from that point, we jump over here. This is in the Kharkiv Oblast, and what we see is that more Russian strikes are hitting the Kharkiv Oblast, This comes from Oleg Subanov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. And he says, quote, rocket attacks on the Chuhiv, Izium, and Budakiv and Kharkiv districts in the Kharkiv region on August 31st. One person was killed, 5 citizens were injured, including a 13-year-old boy. Residential buildings, private autos, an ambulatory building, and an agricultural enterprise infrastructure were damaged, end quote. And that finally starts to lead us here into the Donbass and the real meat and potatoes of the war. And this is where the main fighting has been ongoing. This is where we see quite significant troop concentrations of Russian forces. This is where the war is happening. And as you take a look, we see that down here, this is near Kramatorsk, which is really where the main kind of logistical head is right now. They say that this is the daily Donetsk update, which comes from Pavel Krylenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He says, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August 31st. 5 people were killed, 12 citizens were injured, end quote. We jump over here, we take a look at the Luhansk, and what we see is there are major offensives ongoing in areas. There is a supporting effort up by Siversk, where we see quite significant amount of bombardment and minor ground offensives, usually at the company level or below. You also have precursor bombardments in areas such as Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. But as you take a look over here, Soledar has seen quite some bitter fighting, very close combat fighting. In fact, just on the outskirts of the city alone, you see are getting military operations in urban terrain. In areas around Bakhmut, you're seeing quite a significant amount of fighting as well on the outskirts of the city. All the way down here towards Toretsk, where we see that these all lie along a major Russian axis of advance, trying to push into the Donetsk region even deeper. And most of these appear to have stalled, at least to our best knowledge. The Russian forces took quite significant amounts of losses and really didn't have the troop concentrations required to conduct this wide scale of an offensive. And we also see that their logistics have continued to further break down as precision strikes by HIMARS and M270 Mars 2 systems have completely crippled the Russian logistical infrastructure, as well as their command and control and communications infrastructures. So, but we do see that in order to replace a lot of these losses, the Russian forces are bringing in even more troops and equipment, some of which we actually saw running here throughout the Luhansk Oblast. This is probably to... as these photos are showing, these are once again mechanized and motorized brigades. They're heading in here and they're getting ready to kind of relieve or at least reinforce and replenish the BTGs within this area, battalion tactical groups, that have taken heavy losses and at this point are essentially combat ineffective. Continuing further south, an ammunition depot is reportedly destroyed here, and this is Olginko, which is here in the Donetsk region, by Ukrainian forces. Once again, likely another HIMARS or Mars 2 strike that has completely destroyed this munitions depot. You can see that's you can see the ammunition cook-off occurring here. But we do have a video that someone has taken. So, obviously you can see that's a hell of a... it's a good hit. We jump up here, where we see the Ukrainian Air Force is back out and on the prowl. The Ukrainian Air Force has been conducting operations continuously throughout the duration of the war. Neither side maintains any kind of air superiority throughout the entirety of Ukraine. Most of the time they have localized air superiority. For instance, the Russian jets are relatively safe to fly over Mariupol without worrying about whether or not they're going to get shot down. Likewise, Ukrainian jets can fly over Kyiv and not worry about getting shot down. And we see them as the Ukrainian Air Force has been bolstered with a lot of spare parts. They've gotten new aircraft, and they're just kind of a better ground situation anyway. A lot of air defenses have been destroyed. They are a lot more effective, and we see them out in a lot more numbers here. Go ahead and take a look. And as we continue here, we can kind of see that once again happening, quote, the Armed Forces of Ukraine shot down 2 Russian UAVs and an enemy helicopter, Ka-52, or an Alligator, in the east of Ukraine on August the 31st. That's coming from the press service of the Air Force Command of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Down here in Mariupol, Russian troops are also on the move. It would appear that as the front lines have become extremely kinetic and as losses continue to mount, the Russian forces are actually pulling from areas that are much less kinetic. So what we can see here is some of that. We have some photos of Russian forces on the move coming out of Mariupol. And you can see them. They're stacked right there on top of these vehicles, and they're out there and moving. As we continue over here, this is some rather poor marking skills. Reportedly, Russian forces attempted to transport quite a few landmines to a new location, except they drove through their own minefield here in the occupied Zaporizhzhia Oblast. The result was a catastrophic destruction of their vehicle as well as the rest of their convoy. Neither Ukraine, and the reason being that you're seeing so many landmines throughout this war is the fact that neither Ukraine nor Russia are signatories of the Ottawa Convention banning self-triggering landmines. But just take a look at this.
Осколки аж видно, как летят, ебать. 200 ТМ, короче. Вот такая хуйня.
So once again, don't maybe mark your own minefields. We start to get into today's big topics, though. The first one is one that involves the entirety of the world, as the UN and the International Atomic Energy Administration inspectors left Zaporizhzhia today and did end up reaching the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant located in Enerhodar. And we could actually see them leaving out this morning in several videos here. I hate those types of flax. That just does not look comfortable. But you do want it very tight around you, by the way. You want it very tight around you. You don't want a lot of room for a round to... Because say if you don't have it tight and there's some room to kind of wiggle around, what can end up happening is, first of all, it kind of gets uncomfortable in some ways. But if a round or some shrapnel was to go through that hole as crazy stuff happens, when stuff like that is ongoing, the round will actually go through that hole and it'll bounce off the inside of your plate. And since it's kind of shaped to you, it'll actually kind of ricochet that round back into your body. It happened at several training events while I was out in 29 Palm. So where there were troops out there, there were Marines that were out there training. Nobody in my unit, thankfully, but there were Marines that were out there training, and they had a round and it zipped. Were firing an M240 machine gun. The round went through, and it actually impacted. It went through a little hole that was created by some breathing room that this Marine had particularly had in the front of his flak, and it went through and it bounced in and it ricocheted inside of him multiple times. I do believe he lived, but it was... So you want these things to be tight to you. But not my favorite style of flak. You can see them. This is the nuclear team actually going through the checkpoint. Now, this is coming from Slorm Raptor, and they have asked here. People say the Ukrainian detailed plans of attack might have been leaked. That the Russians were able to defend in a more successful way, and that the Ukrainian offense has lost steam. Is there any truth to that? That's something that would probably that I can't really talk on. I haven't seen anything regarding detailed plans for the KHERSON offensive. Not from Russian channels, which we follow pretty much everything you could find. If we could find it, we pretty much have it for the Russians at this point. I've never seen it on anything from the Western channels. Obviously not from the Ukrainians, but there's also an information war going on. So I do not believe so. It's when you're talking about orders. Okay, when you're talking about military orders, it's not like there's this giant. I mean, someone has a big overall scheme of maneuver that they want to do, but orders are being written from So this guy gives an order. All right, he writes out his 5-paragraph order up here. So he writes out his 5-paragraph order, and then he gives that order to his subordinates. So say it's the general writes the order, and then his 5-paragraph order and his frago and all of his stuff, and then he goes and he sends all this stuff down to his regimental heads, all his colonels, and the colonels are going to write their own 5-paragraph orders for each of their individual tasks. And then those individual tasks, those individual orders, which are created just by that colonel in order to come up with a game plan for his unit to achieve the task that he was given by the orders from the general, is now going to write stuff for the battalion commanders. And the battalion commanders are going to write their own 5-paragraph order for how the battalion commanders are going to complete something. And it's going to be totally dependent on how that battalion commander plans on achieving his overarching objectives given to him by the regimental commander. And the regimental commander is going to achieve so that the regimental commander can achieve the objectives given by the general. And then that continues down. I learned how to write 5-paragraph orders as a corporal. Okay, it just continues going down because it goes all the way down the general, the division commander to the regimental commander to the the battalion commander, to the company commanders, to the platoon commanders, to the squad leaders, to the fire team leaders. All the way down, everyone's going to write out their own 5-paragraph orders. And it's in their own fashion how they're going to achieve their specific objectives that they were given. There's no way to go through the entire overarching plan because a lot of it depends on a lot of them it's very individualized depending on what the objectives is. You can say, like, one of the objectives could just be to set conditions to take KHERSON. And then that regimental commander can be like, sweet, I'm going to set conditions to take KHERSON. And he's going to come up with whatever conditions those are. That could literally be his order. You're going to set conditions to take KHERSON. Not to take KHERSON, but set the conditions to prepare for it. And then that regimental commander has full operational capability to go, okay, what do we need to do to take KHERSON? And then that's his plan. But that doesn't tell you what the guys up north are going to be doing. There's no, one, and it's also very compartmentalized, too. So it's a lot of flexibility. It's a lot of adaptability because you want the people on the ground, on the front lines, to have flexibility to deal with the situations around them. No one likes an armchair general, and Ukraine has gotten a lot of military experience, and I don't think they're interested in one either because it seems like they canned a lot that were doing those kind of ideas. So that's my take on it. That is the U.S. military way of doing things. I 100% understand that Ukraine probably isn't the same way. Ukraine doesn't have to be the United States style military with their efficiency or anything else. They just have to be better than the Russians. That's all it takes. You don't have to be better than anybody else but the guy you're facing off against. So, but to be honest, I haven't seen anything about whether or not those plans have been leaked. I do know that it's been very bitter fighting now, but we'll get to that here in a few. To continue on with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, they did actually arrive at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and as a result, the International Atomic Energy Administration did find Russian equipment inside the power plant. It doesn't seem the Russian forces seem to have moved anything. They didn't seem to care. And at this point, they're strongly considering to establish a permanent group of the IAEA at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant for the foreseeable future. So this is their arrival here. And this is coming from RIA Novosti, which is a Russian state-run media news network. Russian state-run media was basically following every move of the IAEA while they were here at the ZNPP.
Колонна миссии МАГАТЭ заезжает на территорию АЭС.
Okay, so we got some more interesting questions coming in as we're talking about this. JL is asking, has asked, what is the acceptable finish of this war result? So Ukraine's actually pretty clearly stated this, and we talked about it on stream a few nights ago. Ukraine very much stated that they want that it will begin and it will end with Crimea. It began with Crimea, it will end with Crimea. They are looking at regaining all of their pre-2014 borders and securing those borders and pushing the Russians completely out and separating all ties with Russia in the process. That is victory for Ukraine. So we do know what those objectives are. How they get there is the question. Let's see. And Slorm Raptor asks, do you think the Ukrainian forces has in this offensive are enough to accomplish their objectives? I read that the attacking army usually needs to be at least 3 times the size of the defending one. Yes. So, that's a question. See, we don't know operational specifics. Once again, there's a lot of operational security around all of this stuff, and I'm also, even if I did know, I wouldn't release that publicly. Because of operational security. But the Ukrainians, we don't know how many forces they have actually put into the fray. In fact, according to MI6, MI6 is the United Kingdom's intelligence agency. They stated that the Ukrainians actually truly hadn't begun the offensive, that they were shaping the battle space is the terminology they used. What that means is that the Ukrainians right now, according to the United Kingdom, which I would think that they would have probably some pretty good information as to what the Ukrainians are doing, considering they're allies with them, they are shaping the battle space, meaning they are setting the conditions to launch a larger offensive. So what we're seeing now, while it's an offensive, I believe it was more of a fluke that this happened. I think that the Ukrainians were kind of shaping the battle space. They're trying to kind of shift Russian forces into positions that was more advantageous for them, and then it turns out that the Russians just kind of broke and opened up a gap in the line, because they had the 109th Mechanized Rifle Brigade, or Rifle Regiment, which is from the DPR. They had VDV on their flank. I believe it was the 7th Air Assault Regiment on their flank. The 7th Air Assault Regiment, because of the large bombardment that had happened the night before, pulled off of their flank and opened up a gap in the line that the Ukrainians then exploited, basically wrapped up the 109th Mechanized Rifle Regiment of the DPR, and then they ended up breaking into a complete rout that opens up a gap in the line, and Ukraine at this point, I believe, is just trying to exploit the gap while it's there. I think that's kind of the situation from my assessment. But once again, we don't have the full picture. Everything is very fragmented. There's very little information that's coming out to be able to tell you exactly what's happening on the ground. It's just enough to kind of keep your interest, and it's enough to kind of give you a general idea that the offensive is quite large and that what's going on right now is quite significant in this war, but not enough to tell you exact specifics. We haven't changed our map. We haven't changed anything. There's just not enough information. Now, when it comes to whether or not they have those forces, I think they certainly do. They have a 1-to-1 power parity, and their firepower parity is quickly shifting into the Ukrainian favor because of NATO weaponry and NATO training and tactics, as well as NATO intelligence. It's also come out, I'm hearing rumors at this point, and something that I didn't post on the stream, is that the Ukrainians actually ended up wargaming the Kherson offensive with United States advisors. So the United States war gamed this whole offensive with the Ukrainians, leading us to believe that this is probably much better thought out and thoroughly planned than really anything the Ukrainians have launched before any of this. So this is quite extensive, and they probably know they have different scenarios that they're running through of, if the Russians do this, like the Americans suggested they would in the war games, then we can react to this. But if they do this, then we will do this. It's a big game of chess, and it is a deadly game of chess. But we'll get some more of that once we get into the Kherson Oblast. Once again, this is coming from AFP News, from the AFP News Agency, and we can actually see some of the images. So this is the leader of that mission. This is Rafael Grossi, who is the chief of the International Atomic Energy Administration, and he is talking to reporters here at the in Zaporizhia before they left about what is going on, what they're getting ready to do, and what their plan is.
We are aware of the current situation. There has been increased military activity, including this morning. Until very recently, a few minutes ago, I have been briefed by the Ukrainian regional military commander here about that and the inherent risks, but weighing the pros and cons, and having come so far, we are not stopping, and I am going to consider the possibility of establishing a continued presence of the IAEA at the plant, which we believe it's indispensable to stabilize the situation and to get regular, reliable, impartial, neutral updates of what the situation is there. So wish us luck. We are aware.
Yep, that's right. That is Russian military equipment and Russian troops inside of the inside of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And it's being inspected by the International Atomic Energy Administration. Russia is the only country in the world ever in history to use a nuclear power plant as a base. And they didn't even bother covering it up. Didn't even bother. That blows my mind.
We are finishing our long-awaited visit to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I have just completed a first tour of the key areas that we wanted to see in this first approach to the whole facility. Of course, there is a lot more to do. My team is staying on, and more importantly, and most importantly, we are establishing a continued presence from the IAEA here. We are finishing.
So not only is he considering it, they will be establishing a continued presence at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And that finally leads us into the big topic of the night, or the second big topic of the night, and that is the Kherson Oblast, the one that everyone has so many questions about and that everyone is very invested in at this point. The situation in Kherson is very interesting. The Ukrainian forces are still on the offensive. They have managed to get to their fourth day within the offensive. And we are kind of seeing some very bitter fighting. But we are seeing some successes, quite a lot of them, in fact. So the first thing we have is that over here, Novokakhovka was struck again. I don't know why the Russians keep using this as a base. They know they're going to get struck here. They know they're in range. Why they keep doing this is one of the pure definitions of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But the Ukrainians forces did identify valuable Russian targets in and around Novokakhovka, which they ended up striking. Once again, we've pretty much seen them strike it every single day. A little short clip there for you. And we're going to go north to south. And then I'm actually going to come up here kind of towards the front. So yesterday was another day of successful strikes. The armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 5 Russian 152mm self-propelled howitzers, 2 A-65 Mista Bs, a self-propelled artillery unit, the Akatsy, 2 self-propelled artillery systems, 3 mobile mortars, 6 ammunition depots, 2 enemy command posts in the Kherson and the Berislav and the Henechki regions in the south of Ukraine on August 31st. And that's coming from Operational Command South. And speaking of these successful strikes, the TB2 Bayraktar, everyone's favorite drone, has made its comeback. The TB2 Bayraktar, we do have drone footage from them operating over Ukraine and over the Kherson Oblast, striking at military targets throughout the entirety of the Kherson Oblast. And they are demolishing their ability to conduct indirect fires. They're targeting mortar and artillery batteries, and they're also targeting logistical command and control capabilities, as well as they're using those powerful optics on them to call in artillery strikes, targeting artillery strikes for more precision-guided munitions. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of this. Bring this up for you guys. So this is my Telegram here. So this does have some copyright music, so I'm not going to be able to play that. But they are lasing a mortar battery. These look like 120mm mortars, quite large. But this is from a TB2 Bayraktar. Direct hit. Once again, we got another one here. It looks like some Russian, minor Russian ammunition depot. Or at least logistical vehicles. Let's see, do they get a hit on? Gotta love drone footage. There we go. Yeah, that's a destroyed vehicle. So there you go, some successful strikes. And we have another set too. So we have another one. This is of them targeting an artillery battery. So this looks like a... believe it's a 2S3. And it's gone. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's one dead 2S3 there. But there you go. There's some more TB2 Bayraktar footage. Yeah, William Young says overhead footage in war is the easiest way to tell what's going on / what blew up. Yes, it is. Pontoon bridge was destroyed. This is over here by Dorivka. This is over here across the Inhalets River. The Russians built a pontoon bridge because earlier in the war, the E-85 bridge here was completely put out of action. They built a pontoon bridge. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian pontoon bridge in the village of Dorivka in the Kherson region on September 1st. That's coming from Vladislav Nazorov, who's the spokesman of the Operational Command South. So, now, not only are the Russians cut off across the Dnipro River, but if you are north, or if you are to the northeast of the Dnipro River, you're cut off by the Inhulets from all the Russian forces around Kherson. Novokakhovka is cut off from Kherson. Kherson is cut off from Novokakhovka. And Novokakhovka is cut off from Berislav. And Kherson's cut off from the entire rest of its own oblast. Your back is against the wall if you are a Russian here inside of the Kherson Oblast. But we see that more explosions are occurring in Chernobivka. At least this has been reported as of about 2 hours ago, or an hour ago or so. What we see here is we are having reports of explosions within the Chernobivka area. They keep using the Kherson International Airport as a means of like logistical command and control sector. It doesn't make much sense to me, but I'm not going to tell the operation. I'm not going to tell JLS where's the closest operational bridge. In like Zaporizhia. There isn't one. I mean, there isn't the closest. You would have to go to the other side of. So to answer your question, JL, this bridge is destroyed. This bridge is destroyed. This bridge is destroyed. So you have to go all the way over here. Oh, past Enhadar, all the way over to like here. This is these are the closest bridges that are still effective to get to the northern part. That's it. You would have to go up through, around Zaporizhia, back through, past Nikopol, and back down into the Kherson Oblast, and then you still couldn't get to Kherson because this bridge is destroyed. That's the closest crossing point. There isn't another one. As far as I'm tracking, I've looked at satellite imagery. There is not another good bridge to cross at. That was it. That's it. You're done. Anyway, continuing on. So these are the explosions out at Chernobivka. So a little bit of last minute reporting here. Yep. So yeah, so they keep using the. So they have quite an extensive. My understanding is they have quite a lot of defensive lines just outside of Kherson. So it could be that the Ukrainians are striking defensive lines just outside Kherson, or they could once again be striking the Kherson International Airport, which has been cratered and bombed and. They have destroyed the Kherson International Airport so many times. I don't think Russia quite understands that they just shouldn't use that no more. Just like they shouldn't use Novakovka. In fact, they should just all go home. But obviously, that's not going to happen now, is it? And now for some of the footage that you guys have been waiting for. Today has been a very rough day. It's been a very bitter day. There's been very heavy fighting all throughout the Kherson Oblast, not all of which we can really pinpoint to any areas within the Kherson Oblast. So here is a conglomerate of different footage from today and over the past, Kherson offensive that has been ongoing, that has finally been released, at least to the public today. So that way you guys can take a look at some of this pretty heavy fighting that's ongoing. So go ahead and take a look.
كده يا وين подарить نهار إن شاء الله تصقيع وتسوق короче стрельбище мишень طولو да молодец ايش تعوض короче архангельск короче
Присел. Давай, быстрее. Работай мухой. Работай мухой, тихо.
If you could tell, the Russians are right here. Like, right here. Like, this guy, I'm pretty sure they... I'm taking a look here. So they pop up. And they start dumping rounds just right here. Just right there. So that guy could pop up and take a rocket shot. When they're screaming, at least you know they're alive. Yeah. Yeah. Ain't that the truth? So a lot of people are saying, you know, this Slorm Raptor says the last 4 days are probably the bloodiest of the whole conflict. And then William Young says, I think that the Severe Donetsk Lysychansk week may win that, but I'm sure there's a lot of casualties recently. So I think Mariupol has those both beat by a good margin, actually. The Battle of Mariupol is probably still, hands down, I think the bloodiest battle. Just because it's just an absolute bloodfest between Ukrainian and Russian troops inside of Mariupol. And there's nowhere to go. There's no, like, we have to fall back or retreat to our next line or anything. This will be, either it will be mass surrenders, it will be the bloodiest battle of the entire war. That I can tell you, just because of the massive amount of troops involved. But the most bloody battle, I think, so far in the war. In you know, it is just the Battle of Mariupol. But yeah, it's pretty bad. And then Caffeine says, when they're screaming, at least you know they're alive, regarding the wounded Ukrainians. Yeah, that means that they're alive. Storm Raptor says, wow, I didn't know so many civilians died in Mariupol. Someone in the chat, William Young, has said that Mariupol's civilian deaths alone are estimated well over 100,000. We can't confirm any of that. It's coming. That is a rumor flying around that can't be really reported on. I talked to Paul yesterday. Right now, the estimated deaths, according to supposedly a journalist who was going through morgue records in Mariupol, said that the deaths come out to something like 113,000 people in the civilian population so far. 113,000 people killed in the civilian population in Mariupol. Original estimates put it at like anywhere from 10 to 20,000, so that actually puts it at about 11 times higher than the initial estimates. 90% of the city of Mariupol is completely destroyed. If it hasn't collapsed on its own, it will have to be demolished and completely rebuilt. And there are at least 4 different grave sites, each housing anywhere from between 3,000 to 5,000 bodies inside of mass graves, marked with simply numbers, not even names. It's quite extensive. It's pretty crazy. The thing is that with Mariupol, we won't truly know the extent of Mariupol until it's been completely recaptured, and the investigation, which will probably take years, if not decades, begins and finishes. But that is everything here in the Kherson Oblast, with one exception, and that's kind of includes the Mykolaiv Oblast as well. Russian missiles were fired from the Kherson Oblast and are currently headed over to Mykolaiv. These were fired earlier tonight, which we do have footage of. And as we begin to wrap up Ukraine for the night, what we end up seeing is that another Russian missile was shot down. The Black Sea Fleet is still firing over into Ukraine, mostly from their submarines, as surface vessels are too susceptible of incoming missile attacks. But another Russian missile was downed here. Quote, on September 1st, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down a Russian missile in the Odessa region. That's once again coming from Operational Command South. Well, that is everything inside of the country of Ukraine over the past 24 hours and a little bit beyond, I would say. But that doesn't mean that's everything that's happened throughout the world, and that has to deal with Ukraine in general. In fact, there's been quite a bit of stuff that's been ongoing, and we're going to go ahead and roll right into that. As we jump over here into Moscow, traffic jams are currently occurring in downtown Moscow. Apparently, an individual or a group hacked into a large taxi service within downtown Moscow, Yandex Taxi to be specific, requesting every available taxi to central downtown, creating traffic jams throughout the entire city. Nice. Very, very nice. Whatever smug individuals managed to do this, congratulations. I'm very proud of you. How to screw with the Russians 101. Max says, I would be so mad. Yeah, I would be too. I'd be pretty pissed if I was waiting on my taxi. Oh, man. Wow. It's kind of looking like DC traffic at about 6 a.m. Oh, man. It's pretty bad. We go over here. This is coming out of the Sverdlovsk Oblast in Russia. So Russian losses inside of Ukraine are quite substantial. Insanely high. I would say pretty much every BTG at this point has been rendered combat ineffective at least once. And as a result, the Russians are pulling from everything they can. They're pulling from their mothballed fleets of equipment that have been laying in storage without repair or oversight for decades now. They're pulling that equipment. They're pulling it from their eastern military sectors. They're pulling it from their northern military sectors. They're pulling it from their southern military sectors to include Syria, just to make sure that they can get enough equipment to replenish their losses inside of Ukraine. It is insanity how much they are bringing to bear. William Young says, I'm curious on the percent of material losses they've taken. I am too. I am very curious to know. Now, there are some sources that we can kind of get a general idea and base off of public figure numbers. But the issue is that they are, with every time you're seeing these vehicles being destroyed, troops are getting killed and injured. The crews are getting killed and injured. And there's a severe manpower shortage. I mean, just look at the Kherson offensive. The issue is that who's going to crew these vehicles? You can keep... It doesn't matter if you have the tanks. It doesn't matter if you have the tanks, the fuel, and the ammunition for them. But if there isn't anyone to drive the tank and to shoot the tank, it doesn't matter. And that's what we're seeing here. But we can already see they're still bringing in insane numbers of equipment. Delta Aviation 23 says that the Kyiv Independent posts numbers each day. Actually, the Kyiv Independent reposts the numbers that are posted by the Department of, or the Ministry of Defense, which also posts them every day. But, because we follow both of those. But we don't talk about battlefield casualties past localized events. And reported numbers. Notice I say reportedly a lot. I'm not stating anything as fact, okay? Because the truth of the matter is I am sitting in the United States of America, I'm not there. Okay? I'm not there. So I'm not going to, unless we can 100% with confidence say that something is true, you're going to hear me say reportedly and supposedly quite often, because I don't want to mislead you and I don't want to say something is fact and then it not be so. But reportedly, Ukraine has killed and wounded 47,000 Russian troops. That was as of this morning, and they have destroyed like 1,300 tanks and ridiculous number of armored vehicles. And if that was the case, the war would be over. Okay, Ukraine is inflating their numbers quite significantly, and whether that's purposeful or not doesn't matter. According to Desert Storm, we would have killed the United States Army or the United States military rather, during Desert Storm would have annihilated the Iraqi army 7 times over by battlefield commander reports alone. When the Wagner group attacked the Conoco gas fields back in 2018, they told us that a battalion of Russian tanks, T-90s, had crossed the Euphrates River. That sure as hell wasn't correct. I mean, it was a bad situation regardless, but that sure as fuck wasn't correct. So, is it accurate? Not really, probably not. And there's probably some purposeful inflating. You have to remember, Russia and Ukraine are in an information war. But, so we're not going to report on casualties outside of localized events, because the inaccuracies and the likelihood of propaganda there is too high for us to consider it reasonable to report on it with any kind of confidence. And once again, I don't want to mislead you I don't want to mislead you on what the situation is as the viewers. I want you to be informed. I don't want you to be taking in just propaganda, if that makes sense. This is a Russian train steaming ahead over to the front lines. So quite an immense amount of equipment there. And as we jump all the way here over into the Far East, Russia has launched military drills with China and India. The Strategic Command and Staff Exercise, or SKSHU, Vostok 2022, has begun in the Russian Federation, which involves more than 50,000 military personnel, as well as more than 5,000 pieces of equipment, of weapons, and military equipment. According to the media on Thursday, September 1st, we were talking about working out defensive and offensive actions at 7 training grounds of the Eastern Military District, as well as in the waters and the coastal regions of the Sea of Okhotsk and the Sea of Japan. The maneuvers involve 140 aircraft, 60 warships, boats, and supporting vessels. The fact that Russia came up with enough equipment and troops to do this blows my mind. But so be it. And that allows us to roll into the rest of Europe. The first thing we have over here is that Finland will provide Ukraine with a new batch of military aid. Finland will be sending the 8th aid package to Ukraine. As reported in a press release of the Ministry of Defense, Finland will donate defense supplies worth 8.3 million euros to Ukraine, bringing the total value of Finland's defense donations to Ukraine to 92.3 million euros, or $92.2 million USD. Since the beginning of Russia's invasion, a defense ministry spokesman said on Thursday. The ministry did not disclose details about the content of the aid, delivery methods, and timing. The reason is to ensure the cargo is delivered to its destination. As we jump down here and into over by Istanbul, what's going on here? This is the Bosphorus Strait in Turkey. Ukrainian grain ship has run aground here and essentially closed the entirety of the Bosphorus Strait. The Lady Zema, carrying Ukrainian agricultural products, did run aground and close all traffic throughout the entirety of the strait. And there you do have a photo of the ship as it has run aground there. Xenocide talking about the military exercise says legit India is about ready to fight China. Actually, they both would really like to kill each other. But that is probably been as long standing as China and India have existed as nations. You jump down here into the Middle East, where in Damascus an unidentified plane fired rockets near the city of Damascus last night. An unidentified plane fired several rockets at the location of Lebanese Hezbollah near Damascus. On impact, one militant of the group was killed and 3 more were injured. The Syrian Defense Ministry said that the raid was carried out by the Israeli Air Force, which does indeed make sense. It is something that I could see the Israeli Air Force doing. And as we jump down here, in a little bit of something a little funnier, and this is in the village of Husan, which is just to the west of Bethlehem, which is in Palestinian territory. An IDF, or Israeli Defense Forces, armored vehicle, ended up getting dumped into a ditch. Folks, rollovers are pretty serious. Military rollovers kill a lot of people. Yeah, this is kind of funny. Just take a look.
كلب صور كلب صور
Yep. And this is the result. Impressive driving. 10 out of 10 should have received his military license. Rooster sideburns. Oops. Well, the driver drank too much vodka. He's Israeli. He's not Russian. But yeah. Partied a little too hard, I think, over there. Over here in Basra, it's been a pretty restless night in the country of Iraq once again. Here in Basra, another attempt was made to attack the Asabib headquarters. Secondly, one of the local leaders of the militia, Saraya al-Salam, was killed by unknown persons, after which the armed solderists began to run through the streets and shoot into the air. The police, escorted by the army and an anti-terrorism unit, arrived at the scene and dispersed these demonstrations, along the way arresting several suspects in the murder. Solderists are a political faction of mostly made up of poor Shia individuals within Iraq that is led by the Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, who leads the Mahdi army, a militia within Iraq. And they actually fought against the American coalition, specifically the Battle of Rafadi, I think is what it is. Najaf, sorry. The Battle of Najaf is where the U.S. fought the Mahdi army, as well as in Basra. and some Baghdad too. But pretty much everyone fought against each other in Baghdad. So he's not a very good individual. First of all, he's very anti-Western, which is a lot of places, especially in Iraq, considering we've invaded them twice and occupied them for like 10 years. I can see why some people would probably have some anti-American sentiments and anti-Western sentiments to it. He is Iranian. He is Iranian backed. He is Iranian trained. Okay, it's Iran trying to spread its influence into a foreign country, seeing as during the time of Saddam Hussein, as a result of the Iran-Iraq war, there isn't really a possibility that they would be able to do so while Saddam Hussein's in power. U.S. comes in, kicks Saddam Hussein out of power. Saddam Hussein is killed. Now that begins the insurgency. Iran begins training. Iran would love to kill Americans directly, but they're too scared to actually do so. So they train a bunch of basically terrorists and insurgents within Iraq, and that is who you fight in the insurgencies during the entirety of the Iraq War, and even up into this day. Kataib Hezbollah, for instance, the Mahdi Army, the Peace Brigades, all of these. So, and then they're also in direct competition because Iran is Shia. And Saudi Arabia is Sunni. And Iraq happens to be in the middle. Relatively destabilized. Influential. Directly between these two countries. Rich in oil. And just like Iran is willing to funnel weapons to the Houthi rebels to make sure that they keep killing Saudis down here in the Saudi coalition, Iran will do anything it can to expand its influence. Muqtada al-Sadr, being a Shia cleric, he is a very religious figure anyway. Very prominent religious figure, but he is also backed by the Iranians monetarily and in training and in supplies and stuff like that for the Mahdi Army. And then he's also very popular amongst the Popular Mobilization Forces, or the PMFs. And then he's also the one who his influence is mostly amongst areas, especially in Baghdad, Basra, Nasiriyah, Najaf, Kirkuk, Erbil, Mosul, areas that have very large but poor, impoverished Shia and Shiites populations. So that's kind of where he gets a lot of his power and a lot of his support from. These people are very poor. These people are very impoverished and are really trying to get any way they can to build a better life for themselves. And these are the ones that would have probably a lot of anti-government sentiments. So that's kind of what we're seeing there. We come up here into Kazakhstan, where we see that the president of Kazakhstan has announced early elections for the head of state. In an address to the parliament on Thursday, Kazakhstan's president, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, has proposed a snap presidential election this autumn and to reduce the presidency to 1 7-year term from the current 2 5-year terms. Tokayev also said he will seek a second term and has also suggested holding snap parliamentary elections for the first half of 2023. Quote, I propose that we hold early presidential elections in the autumn of 2022, Tokayev said, saying measures were needed to strengthen our statehood and maintain the momentum of reforms after the Central Asian country underwent a political crisis in January that left 225 people dead. We can go ahead and take a look here.
С вами соображениями, имеющими прямое отношение к будущему нашего государства. В современных геополитических условиях нам нужно последовательно укреплять свою государственность, твердо следовать курсам реформ и обновления. В своих действиях мы должны быть предельно прагматичными и исходить из долгосрочных интересов страны. Крайне важно сохранить набранный темп реформ, решить все политические вопросы, не откладывая их в долгий ящик. Для этого нужно рационально выстроить предстоящие электоральные циклы.
And that's just him addressing the Kazakhstani parliament. JL asked, is it the guy who, or regarding Muqtada al-Sadr, is it the guy who recently said he's getting away from politics? A few days ago, he told his supporters not to fight and attack the Green Zone. Yeah, so, Muqtada al-Sadr has no problem whatsoever. You can, by the way, for this story, you can go and check out Al Jazeera. They have an entire thing on it. And it's also not run by the Ba'athist Party anymore because it's run by BBC. But he said Muqtada al-Sadr has no problem whatsoever actually... He has no problem whatsoever attacking the Green Zone. At all. None. Not a problem. He is very willing to use violence to get his way. And he has a lot of supporters that were willing to die for him. The Mahdi army is considered a PMF, or a popular mobilization force. It's a militia that's backed partially by the government because they helped the government fight against the Islamic State, just like Katiba Hezbollah. Katiba Hezbollah also supports Muqtada al-Sadr. So it's quite an extent. In fact, let's see here. I am going to go onto my phone here for you guys. I know I don't have them in my computer anymore, but what I do have is I have pictures from when I was at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and you can see that they have this giant poster of Muqtada al-Sadr just thrown over like 6 stories of a building. Let's see here. Yeah, there he is. Okay, sweet. So, give me a second, guys. I'm trying to get something together for you so you can see what I'm talking about. And it's personal experiences too, so there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, so to kind of, get rid of the silence here. So Muqtada al-Sadr is a very interesting individual, and the PMS are very interesting groups and organizations. Let's see. Nope. They are very interesting organizations, to say the least. A lot of them fought against the Islamic State, which was fantastic, but they also were, there we go, very willing to do some pretty horrendous things at the same time. And they're very anti-American in a lot of ways, which isn't very good if you're trying to, not get a lot of people killed. Because the United States is very willing to defend its forces. And so the Mahdi army and the Katiba Hezbollah, which likes to fire rockets at the Americans, really don't end very well. It normally does not end very well for them. So, finally I got this photograph to work. I can pull this for you guys. So let's see here. Por favor. Where did I post it? Okay. So there you guys go. So this is my view from inside the Baghdad Embassy compound in Iraq. So this is what it was like. As you can see, these are all flags of the Popular Mobilization Forces. And there is Muqtada al-Sadr's giant face draped on the apartment buildings across the street. So this is from the Baghdad embassy attack in 2020. I was part of the crisis response force located in Kuwait with the U.S. Marines, and we got the response, or we got the call on New Year's Eve to respond. This is the day this is the next day. This is roughly about 8 hours after we initially responded to the U.S. Embassy complex, which I know that ISR footage got aired on like every television in the world. But this is the immediate aftermath. And this doesn't have anything too specific. This has all been repaired and everything from my understanding anyway. But they actually broke into, and as you can see the charring in there, they burned into the gatehouses that was located here. And you can see that they were starting to tear down like the wire and everything else. And you can see all these guys back here. You can see them in their uniforms. These are members of the Katiba Hezbollah. In fact, that's what all these yellow flags are. These are Katiba Hezbollah flags. In JLS, is Muqtada al-Sadr a member of the same party that Saddam was? No. The only leading political figure in the world, I think, that's left that is the same party that Saddam was is Bashar al-Assad, who is the regime leader in Iraq. What Saddam Hussein was a part of is called the Ba'athist Party. The Ba'athism is a ideology of bringing together basically it's enlightenment through Islam and through being an Arab, essentially Arab enlightenment and Muslim enlightenment, from my understanding of what Baathism is. And it got turned into a political movement. The issue is that with Baathism, it is very easy to end up having a non-secular and also an authoritarian government, which is what you see in both Iraq and Syria when the Baathists take power. But yeah, once again, as you can see, this guy has no quarry about making issues in the green zone. This is Muqtada al-Sadr, 2020, and the PMF forces at the U.S. Embassy. There you guys go. I'm sorry it took so long to find that photo. That I have a lot of photographs now on my phone, and I had to go all the way back 2 years worth of photos to go and find that for you. So I apologize for that delay. But yeah, I have plenty of that kind of stuff too. I actually have videos and stuff from my first deployment too that I might share from time to time for you guys to kind of help you kind of understand a little bit about kind of what's been going on and kind of the situations in different areas. We jump over here into Taiwan, and this is because Taiwan has shot down a Chinese drone for the very first time. Taiwan's military for the first time shot down an unidentified civilian drone and that entered its airspace near the islet off the Chinese coast on Thursday, after the government vowed to take tough measures to deal with an increase in intrusions. The Defense Command of the Kinmen, a group of Taiwan-controlled islands opposite China's Xiamen and Guangzhou cities, said in a statement released by Taiwan's defense ministry that the drone entered restricted airspace over Leon Islets just after midday. Troops in the islet tried warning it away, but to no effect, and shot it down, with the remainings landing in the sea. And that would appear actually to be everything kind of major news, or I should say major news, but kind of like the depressing geopolitical stuff. Now we have one news story for you guys to wrap up the night. And we are getting ready to move into kind of the interesting stuff. But before we do, Zach Jeffers says, is Taiwan still trying to procure F-35 still, or has it been shot down? I don't know. I haven't been following that development too closely because I've been really... to kind of give you an idea how this works, we have an entire team of people that research, and we're actually looking for researchers specific, especially if you can also translate too, so we can get more local sources and have a little bit of an easier time. But there's an entire team that does this. So myself and also another one of our researchers focus very heavily in Ukraine because that's our special report, while Riley specifically does all of the international stuff. So Riley's the one that goes and finds the stuff that's in Africa and Asia and the Middle East and stuff, and asks me questions if it's like the Middle East or has to deal with like the Islamic State and stuff I know about, so because I can put that stuff into context. But we break it up. So I haven't been following that development myself. I've been focused on Ukraine, but it is kind of a team effort to put this thing together. So I will ask. Riley's currently not with me right now, or not here, kind of working the stream with me right now. So I'll have to ask and find out at a later date for you, and hopefully we'll be able to find something to kind of follow up that for. So sorry I can't answer that question right now. I just don't have enough knowledge on it. NASA will try to redirect an asteroid live, though, as we kind of get into the interesting news here. And that is that in less than 4 weeks, NASA's DART double asteroid redirection test spacecraft will ram into a moonlet of a binary asteroid system named Didymos. It has a relatively similar orbiting asteroid named Dimorphos, which usually is DART's target. According to NASA, Dimorphos measures 160 meters across and will be roughly 10.8 million kilometers from Earth at the time of the impact. DART's estimated collision will take place at 4:44 a.m. IST on September 27th, or that's also 7:14 Eastern time on September 26th. After the collision takes place, the European Space Agency will send a follow-up mission named Hera to perform a close-up inspection of DART's impact. The DART mission intends to test the kinetic impactor planetary defense technique, which involves artificially changing an asteroid's path. If successful, this technology could save the Earth from potentially hazardous asteroids in case one hurls towards us into the future. So they have a little bit of a GIF here, or GIF. I can't believe I just said GIF. Basically, we're going to smash something into an asteroid, and it's going to change its direction, hopefully. It's a lot of math to figure out just how much force you need to do this kind of stuff. It's a lot more math than I'm ever going to be capable of, but that's okay. So, it's a lot of news to cover in one day, especially regarding the KHERSON Oblast. I know it's a little bit different with how we're doing it today, but it's okay. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it, at least found it knowledgeable, even if you didn't enjoy it. I know it's a lot of depressing stuff, but all of this stuff we're doing for charity. So we here at the New News, we all got together when we started this project, and we said we are never going to take profits or anything from any of this, because we don't feel it's right to profit off of people's misery. Because in the news, a lot of this is people suffering. I mean, the war in Ukraine is immense suffering. The Islamic State terror attacks, immense suffering. Natural disasters, climate change. I mean, it's not just these regions that you normally think about. It's people all over the world. I mean, there's even poverty and starvation in parts of the United States. You have disasters ongoing in the United States, too, in developed countries. You have some of the worst droughts in Europe ever. So we want to be able to help these people, and the only way we can do that is through you guys. You guys allow us to be the news that gives back, which is our motto. We want to give back directly to the same situations that we report on here on the news with everything that we can. And the way that we do that is through you guys. So please be sure to check out the video description below, and you're going to see a ton of different donation links. And please be sure to check out all of those charities. All of them have been vetted by us. Obviously, you saw Harry in here earlier. He works with the Ukrainian Armed Forces. They're looking to get a vehicle. His is down there as well. You guys can go. All of them have been vetted by us. 80% or more of all of the proceeds that they receive actually go to their programs, to actually going forward and helping people. So please, if you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Please, help us grow this channel. The main thing about this channel is that the more people that are here, the more of an impact that we will have overall. And I can't think of a better thing to dedicate my time to than to reporting the news and raising money for charity. 100% of everything we do, we're never doing super chats, we're never doing merchandising. We're only going to be doing charities. We want to be able to get to the point where we can have enough subscribers and stuff like that that we can actually put fundraisers on every single stream that we do. So we're just continually raising money for charities to help people affected by the very same news that we talk about every single day. So thank you very much for the support you've already given us. There's been a ton of support from you guys, and I cannot thank you guys enough whatsoever. It has been amazing. There's been a ton of amazing support for the organizations below. And if you want to, we actually have opened up a lot of social media accounts as well, so you guys can get in touch with us in other locations. But the best way to get in touch with us is actually on our Discord. All of those social media accounts are actually listed in the description as well. And if you want to check out the map on your own, you can go to our website under daily, under our works daily maps. And we have it sorted by month, and you can go through all the archived ones as well as this one and go and check out that more information sections that we have listed here. But I hope that once again that you found this all enjoyable, and if not enjoyable, at least knowledgeable. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Please be safe. Please, I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I hope that you have that safety and security in the very near future. I really hope that you get that. I really don't want to end up reporting on a situation that you as a viewer may be involved in. But with that, please have a wonderful night. Have a happy Friday. For those that are in the United States, we are getting ready to move into Labor Day this weekend. So look forward to that. Just get through tomorrow. You have your entire Labor Day weekend. And hopefully we'll see you back here tomorrow. Hopefully maybe you even bring a few friends. If you have more charity locations, please get in touch with the staff member on our Discord. We'd love to hear about those charities too, so we can get the vetting process started and get those added. But thank you very much, everybody. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям плечом, даже танки и бочок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.